My name's Leo and I'm a boat builder and a sailor, and I'm on a mission to rebuild and restore this 109-year-old classic sailing yacht, Tally-Ho. I recently roughed out the Rabbet in the port side of the stem, and now it's time to do the same thing on the starboard side. Well, it's time for me to start shaping the keel timber, and this is actually a job that I've kind of been dreading a little bit. Not because the shaping itself will be difficult, but transferring the shape from the lofting floor onto the keel timber is going to be quite challenging, because the timber itself is already partially cut, and so there's not many square sort of reference faces to use on it. But I do have a plan, and the first step of that plan is to draw out the bottom face of the keel timber onto the lofting floor. I'm not going to get into too much technicality of how the lofting floor works right now. You can go back and watch my lofting videos if you're interested, but as you'll see, it involves a lot of shuffling around on your knees and elbows. So what I'm doing here is a little bit of a workaround. I'm trying to transfer the shape of the bottom of the keel timber and also the position of the Rabbet onto the sides of the keel timber. Now I've made this first jig which is going to give me a sort of set distance as a datum outside the keel timber. I can use that to get the centre line on the bottom of the timber, and also to measure how far I'm drilling in, so I can drill in a series of points along the Rabbet on each station. So it's probably quite hard to see what's actually going on here, so I'm just going to run through it step by step. Firstly, I put the jig in the correct frame bay. Then I line up the centerline on the jig with the centerline on the boat. The top of the centerline timbers are generally pretty flat, so it should be all square, but I double check that with the spirit level and put a tiny shim under one side of it if necessary to make sure that the jig is vertical on the sides and horizontal on the top. I clamp it into place and then slot the bottom part of the jig into position, and then that bottom piece will show the centerline again, so I can mark it on the bottom of the keel timber. So I make a quick mark on the centerline on the bottom, I scribe a line across the bottom going athwartships. Later on I will connect all those dots with the centerline, and then I'll measure off it at each station and then connect those marks to get the shape of the bottom of the keel timber. I keep my jig in position and I adjust the laser level to show the height of the rabbet at that frame. I can do that easily because I've already set up a board with all the rabbet heights on it, so I can just move the laser level to the right mark on that board. Then I use tape to mark the distance on my drill bit. So then I drill that hole into the side of the keel timber. The laser level shows me what position vertically to place it, and then the tape mark on the drill bit shows me how far I need to drill into the keel timber. Alright, so on every frame station now, on the keel, I've got a hole that shows the position of the rabbet and the distance away from the centerline, and I've also got a mark on the bottom of the keel which shows the shape of the keel at that station. So if I join those two marks up, that should give me the shape of the keel on each station, and then I've just got to take off the excess in between every station, and then the keel should be the right shape. Then of course I'll have to cut the rabbet in. So I carved the shape of the keel onto each station line on this side of the boat using the TurboPlane wheel on the angle grinder, and that worked pretty well. It's quite effective. But on the other side of the boat there's a little bit more material to remove, especially on either end, because of the shape of the timber that I put in there. And so rather than using the TurboPlane wheel on the other side, I thought I'd try using a more traditional tool. So I'm going to be using this, and this is a lipped shipwrights adze. A bit different to a carpenter's adze, which has a straighter blade and doesn't have these lips on the side, but these lips mean that you can use it to shape a board, and it will cut the edges of the grain as you chop it out. I'll admit that I'm not a really experienced adze user. I have used them, but not a huge amount. But this should be a good opportunity for me to practice, and it should be a good way to take off a lot of material. And also I thought it'd be quite interesting to compare the sort of old way versus the new way and see what the time difference is and so on. This is a very traditional shipwrights tool that would have been used for a lot of the wood shaping that I'm doing here by chainsaw and power plane. It is quite a skill. It takes quite a long time to get good with an adze, but it's a really cool tool and I'd like to be better with it, so there's a good opportunity to get a bit more practice. Right, well, it's day 2 of working with the Adze, and I can tell you that it is slower than using the TurboPlane, but that might be because I'm not that skilled at using an Adze yet. The Adze also gives a much nicer finish, and I am actually taking more material away doing it like this because I'm opening a sort of wider groove, so perhaps the race is not over yet. Either way, I'm enjoying getting a bit of practice. You saw me just sharpening the Adze, and you might have noticed I put a very slight back bevel on the blade, so I sharpened the front of the blade, the main bevel, to 25 degrees and sharpened the back with a very slight back bevel, and then honed it on leather. It's very sharp. I actually just cut my finger doing that in that second. But anyway, the back bevel is supposed to help it sort of come out of the cut. It didn't have a back bevel on it before, so we'll see if that helps a bit. So part of the rent I pay, I guess, for using this workshop is to sometimes make things for my hosts and help fix stuff and various other things. But I don't normally bother filming it, but I was quite pleased with this. It's a little book stand. I just thought I'd show you guys because it might give a sort of glimpse of the sort of woodwork we might be expecting to see in Tally-Ho's interior one day. So it's nothing fancy, there's no sort of fancy joinery in this particular piece, but it's nice to use this sort of nice subtle curves, and of course it's all fastened with copper and bronze and a few coats of varnish to finish. Right, so it's time for me to fill in this little hole here at the front of the keel timber. So I'm just going to glue and screw a small wedge into this gap. It's going to be glued to the forefoot with polyurethane glue and screwed into that as well. And then on the join to the keel timber, it's just going to have felt and tar. And so that means it's essentially going to be part of the forefoot, and then it'll be free to move in relation to the keel timber, which it shouldn't do much, but if there's any swelling with the keel timber, then it won't affect the glue and pull off this other piece. Obviously it's not structural, it has a slight hydrodynamic effect, and it's mostly aesthetic. The reason I'm gluing it onto the top rather than just screwing and tarring it is that the forward edge of it is going to be a feather edge coming into the front of the forefoot. So unfortunately, just because of the width of these centerline timbers which are used, there's a very small area just here where there's not actually enough timber to make the right shape and size of the outside of the centerline. What that means is that when I carve this down to its finished shape, if I don't do anything about it, there will be a small gap just here in this little recess here. Now it's really not a lot, probably only 1/4 of an inch maximum, but I've lofted and shaped the centerline so carefully so far that I don't want to try and take that out any other way. So what I'm going to do is just glue in a small piece here, oversize, and then shape that down with the rest of it. That glued piece will make up part of the outside of the Rabbet, but as I said, it'll only be about 1/4 of an inch max, so it won't be a problem. Even if the glue was to fail and that piece fell off, it wouldn't be an issue for the Rabbet or the planking. But I'm pretty confident that the glue should be fine. And I've been extra careful to make sure I've got a really well keyed surface here and a piece that fits pretty well. Alright, that's all I've got time for right now, but thanks a lot for watching, and a massive thank you to everyone who's donated or otherwise supported the Tally-Ho project. It makes a huge difference, and it means I'm able to take the time to make and edit these videos, so I really appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Cheers.